I'd like to welcome Peter Montoya to the interview meetup. Peter Montoya is a friend of this podcast / meetup, and I'm just trying to find where I put his details so that I could give you a bit of an introduction. Peter is based in California and is a thought leader, skilled orator, and successful entrepreneur. Today, we're going to ask him a couple of questions about the death of social media and the byline, it's time to transform social from an exploitative entertainment tool into a tool for global cooperation. So I'm going to lead some of the questions. Jess has also prepared a couple of questions, but feel free once we've got through the meat of it to ask questions and have this as a more interactive. We'll start sort of more interview style at the beginning, and then obviously try to roll it into a nice open discussion about what we're calling the death of social media. So welcome, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
Thrilled to be here.
So I just was doing, in preparation for this meeting, I just did a little bit of research, and it says that you were a successful, I mean, not that you're not successful now, but you were a successful entrepreneur for the first 25 years of your career with a company called Marketing.pro. Is that correct?
Yep. So it was a marketing technology company, and we did marketing automation in the financial services sector here in the United States. Previously, I had been an advertising agency specializing in financial advisors. And then I said, well, I'm really tired of this only eat what you hunt kind of business model where I'd have to make a sale, then service a sale, and then make the next sale. And I wanted recurring revenue, so I decided to start a software company. And I built the software company not knowing, well, kind of how private equity worked. I had no idea that I was going to build it and sell it. I just wanted to build it and build this revenue machine. But it turned out to be exactly what private equity was looking for. They wanted a business that was highly specialized, loyal client base, recurring revenue, and that was exactly what they were looking for to give you a really good multiple. All of a sudden, one day, I understood the game I was playing, and I was playing the game perfectly. I just didn't know it.
Just on that, what led you to advertising? Were you always drawn to advertising? I mean, you've written 2 books that I know about, 2 successful books. Did you start off on in that path, and that led you to advertising, or what was your start?
I was a political science major in college, but I had ADHD. When you have a political science major, you only really have a couple of career choices. You can go to law school, but I just didn't have the focus. You can go into sales, or you can become a bartender. Those were my 3 career options. And so I chose sales. And I was a fairly mediocre salesperson. And when you're mediocre in sales, you want to get better at marketing or branding, because when you do that marketing and branding correctly, it makes the sales process so much better. So I was always been fairly bookly. I've really worked hard to try to read between 24 and 30 books a year. And so I really dove into marketing and branding. And then I was on the cutting edge of the personal branding philosophical movement in 97, 98. I wrote a book called The Brand Called You, which had really good traction back in the day. And that's what started with the advertising agency.
Okay, that's fantastic. Would you term that kind of personal branding, was that around the sort of not the Robert Kiyosaki, but there was a lot of those self-help books about improve yourself and you're the best you, and was that in that sort of vein, or was it slightly on the left or the right of that?
It was much more about applying kind of the rethinking corporate branding and applying it to people. And it was always definitely about taking the natural attributes of a human being and crafting them away, creating a story or a narrative that fit the marketplace. So I was never, and am still not a fan of fabricating things out of whole cloth just to meet a market niche. It really needs to be authentic. But most, there are just tons of personal brands that have become household names, whether it be Charles Schwab or Walt Disney, Calvin Klein. There's lots and lots of brands out there that are large corporate brands, but that piece of persona in there tends to differentiate whether it be a realtor brand or a large multinational brand, and gives it some humanity. People in general don't necessarily want to help other corporations, but we want to help people. And when you put that personal brand in there, it gives that kind of tinge of an underdog, someone who someone who's really passionate about the business, who cares about their clients. So we took really kind of a traditional structure of looking at target market, specialization, positioning, marketing channels, and how to reach an audience, depending on who the audience was. So it was less rah-rah, you can do it, and much more strategic and practical approaches to building a brand.
Okay. And that led into marketing.pro, and I noticed that marketing.pro is still going. Are you involved in it at all, or
No. I got really lucky in 2018 that a private equity company came along, and it was the best possible scenario for an entrepreneur. They wrote me a check and wanted me to go away, and then bought everything cleanly. It could not have been a better transaction for me as a seller. I still have contact with the president because I liked him so much, and I call him maybe once a quarter just because I like seeing how things are going. And he's an exciting guy. He's a really good businessman. I like him a lot.
So now comes my link question from where you are to where you're going, and it said on your bio it says that you had a leadership transformation experience, and that kind of changed how you thought about business. That linking to this America in crisis, just to sort of paraphrase some of the bylines from your book. What was that leadership transformation, and how does that transform into this crisis that America faces? And I have got a follow-up question to that.
So you're referencing my third book, which is The Second Civil War, A Citizen's Guide to Healing Our Fractured Nation. And that book, I think, as far as I know, is the first political self-help book, which means it really is designed to help the average citizen who is rather entrenched into this kind of perpetual anxiety about our country. And that's what that book really is about. And the transformational experience that I had in that regard that changed the way I thought about that, as I love my father-in-law dearly. He would send out regular political emails, and I replied back to that email, one of his emails, when I was in a moment of extremism, with an incredibly hostile, angry, terrible email. And in the moment when I pushed the send button, I thought it was perfectly reasonable. And then maybe a day or so later, I went back and read that email, and I was like, oh my God, why did I say this? What made me think that it was okay to rebuke him in this manner with such utter and complete disrespect? And that really led me to take understand what our roles are in our political life, what our responsibilities are, because I think by far most of us are largely a victim of this political system right now, rather than being a sovereign and conscious agent. And so what that book really is about is transforming yourself from being a pawn into being at least having agency.
So I mean, that's very much an American context, but what I'd like to know is, do you think that is a worldwide sort of, I wouldn't say phenomenon, but I mean, I can think of religious factions in the Middle East that are, against each other, and I suppose most conflicts in the world are around that. Do you think it translates, that sort of thing translates?
It does, and it has, and largely because the ecosystem that is the United States is like a cancer and is spreading around the planet, which is our capitalist-driven media culture, which used to be based on trust. That was kind of the primary offering in the late 80s. It was, we're the most trusted news source, and we provide true insights first. That was the leading proposition. And now the leading proposition is we're going to provide you the most clickbait headline that pulls you into a story that arouses you to keep your attention. And so it's much more about the profit motive than it actually is about providing useful information. And so both our social media and our cable and entertainment networks, TV networks, are kind of permeating the rest of the world. And then even worse than that, we now have American political consultants who have had success or failure here in the United States being hired by countries around the world so we can export this absolutely awful, partisan, incredibly tribal form of politics.
So do you think that social media came first, or people manipulating people for political gain came came first? Because it's not like politics has been around for a long time, but social media or media has been around, maybe not social media. So how do we define what is social media and the death of social media to what is media? Must they both die for us to survive as a species?
Good question. No, I don't. So first of all, when I say the death of social media, I think I'm saying the death of social media 1.0. So you can look at either MySpace, but I really think that Facebook in 2007 really is kind of the birth of real social media. And what this social media platform is about the centralization of your identity and all of your data, and then using that data to exploit value out of their users. And what we're moving to here in the very near future, hopefully just in a couple of years, we're going to be changing the value proposition so that social media is a value add to people versus a detractor. And so,
are you talking about Earth.social?
I certainly am about talking about us, but there's also other social media platforms that are on the horizon. And the large narrative is about decentralization. So any of the major technology companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, it's all about centralizing all of your data. And we're moving now to a decentralized model, whereas I don't use the word user in our company, we use the word member. But you, the member, own your data. And when you share your data, it is only for the help of helping you find what you're looking for, making more useful recommendations. And whenever you decide that you no longer want your data with that organization, you pull it away and that organization doesn't have it anymore. And also a lot of the user data is now being decentralized such that it can't be hacked. Well, you have to hack a lot more places. Nothing's perfectly safe. But rather than hacking one central database to get all the data, it would be much, much more challenging. That's the model we're moving to.
So two questions there. So decentralization, if you could just expand on that topic, but allied to that is the obvious question I think that a lot of people might be asking is how do you make money out of it? I guess the whole reason why Facebook and those companies exist, not why they started, but why they exist now, is that there's a profit motive, and they will only give you a service for free if they're getting something for it. Now, what does that look like from a because it sounds like if you're decentralizing, you're kind of having more infrastructure, therefore maybe more costs. How do you bring those two vectors together?
So what's being talked about now is we're on the verge of Web 3.0, and 3.0. I'm going to use a word here which will probably give some people some hackles, and that is the Cryptoverse, because when I say the Cryptoverse, people go, "Oh my gosh, you're talking about Bitcoin and $66,000, and it's all speculative." Yes, that is one of the manifestations of the early Web 3.0. But what Web 3.0 really is about to me is about dramatically reducing the cost of transaction and reducing the friction between people. That's, to me, at least how the best way I'm explaining it nowadays, which means that we should be able to partition data, your data. So first of all, you own your data, so you have self-sovereign of your data. We can then partition your data and encrypt your data and spread it into a lot of different places, all with the same speed of a centralized database, and at probably a reduced cost. So it'll probably be a hybrid model where not all of the services are decentralized, but the essential element, which is your data and your history, will be decentralized so that you really own it. And then when it comes to revenue models, we will most likely, I still remember in 2009, there was some rumors that Facebook might start charging. And there was a huge kind of uproar from the Facebook community people saying, don't charge, don't charge, don't charge. And then Facebook came out with a promise and said, it was on their website for the longest time. Facebook is free, always has been, and always will be. And consumers sighed a huge sigh of relief and said, oh, thank God. But of course, now we know what that's got us. So I think consumers are a little more open to some different models. And so one model is that you do say, I'm going to share my data. And when I'm sharing my data, I'm actually going to get paid to be watching advertising. That's currently in place. That's one model, but it's based on choice. And it's also based on you removing your data and it being evaporated from the system once it's gone. So that's one model. Another model is a percentage of subscription revenue, which is a big part of our platform. Our platform is really geared toward creators, which are video creators and podcast creators and other influencers who are creating content. And currently their best way to monetize that is through advertising. But we want to give them also a better subscription tool. Patreon is the next closest company to doing what we're doing there, but we think we do that really poorly. So most likely, and we can also charge the creators a subscription revenue, subscription prices as well. So we're going to be looking to really charge the creators to help them build and manage their communities. And more importantly, we want it to be a community, which means there's discourse between creators and their fan base, versus right now, there are no really good platforms to encourage dialogue because of the abundance of trolls and bots. We are going to eliminate that too.
I'm quite a regular YouTube watcher, so I know quite a bit about Patreon. Maybe explain a bit more about Patreon for some of the other people that might not know about it.
Yeah, so Patreon is a subscription management service, whereas a creator can say, okay, I'm going to create these different tiers of services, and you have maybe a free version of a podcast that's maybe 30 minutes long and has advertising. And in that 30-minute podcast, the creator might go, well, there's also an hour-long version of this without ads. Go to Patreon, pay $5 per month, and then we'll give you the RSS code so you can go someplace else into your podcast player and then play the hour-long version. Plus, we'll give you some other goodies. We'll let you onto a Zoom call once a month. We will let you have these free downloads. And right now, it is bifurcated into different places. And we will put that all in one beautiful interface. So both the free version, the subscription mechanism, then and that subscription wall and all the free content is all in one place. And most importantly, we have a content moderation system that will be much more effective promoting civility.
Okay. So is that you want people to be good or civil on the platform? I mean, is that the whole, is that the point? You want to drive good behavior so that you're not, that it's almost the opposite of what you were saying earlier about clickbait and the most outrageous topics that get the most views. You want to kind of go away from that model.
Civility means, when you look at the definition of civility, civility does have a definition which talks about respect and kindness and thoughtfulness in conversation. But the real definition of civility is for the benefit of the Commonwealth. The real reason that I'm creating Earth is I think that both our multinational corporations, our federal governments, and the international community is failing at solving our global problems. So I think that we are facing now global problems and our governments are unable to solve them. But I think there's actually mass agreement on what a lot of those problems are, and people are frustrated. I remember watching this last year or so when India was having 3,000 and 4,000 deaths per day from COVID. I was reading articles about it going, how do I help? I felt so frustrated. So what our platform really does is it erases and eliminates the barriers from people, whether it be politics, religion, political factions, countries, language, so we can actually facilitate global cooperation to solve our really big problems. That's why the platform really exists. Civility, of course, is important because we can actually have useful conversations. But what I'm actually really interested in doing is perpetuating the survival of our species I have numerous fears on the horizon in the next 50 to 100 years. And I don't think unless we have allow for more collective problem solving, we're going to get there.
I think everybody would applaud that approach, and we all want to live in a civil society. I would assume. I mean, maybe there are some people who are a bit, maybe off balance that maybe don't want that. But do you think that most people want that and are willing to give up the sort of the endorphin rush, I guess, that your Facebook and your Twitter give you? I mean, I remember a good few years ago, I was on Twitter for a bit and then I went off, and I was watching a sports event, and I was very irate about something that happened. Oh, that person did this and he did it, and he's doing it like the opposite of what sportsmanship is like. And I went onto the thing and I said, that's what's wrong with football in the moment. Okay, went on. So I got that, but I got a bit of a rush or a feeling of shouting at something, because my wife doesn't. She just switches off when I say things like that. But people want that rush. How do we give them that rush? I mean, is that still something that is? Am I talking rubbish by saying that you're not going to get a rush from the new websites? Or from the new,
I still think that outrage is incredibly important. Outrage and anger and grief and sorrow, and we in no way want to eliminate that, or should we eliminate that from the human experience. We just want the expression of that to be done in a civil manner. So you can be outraged. I think what we're going to do, which is very, very different from every other community platform and the community terms of service, is that we will be banning personal attacks. So you can attack an idea all that you want. You just can't attack people or groups of people on our platform. So that'll be one of the mechanisms and policies we'll be putting in place. So attack an idea, get excited about it. And also to that point, you could also even use colorful language. So in our site, what's hard about natural language processing is it really is contextual. So I'm on Facebook. I watch this TV show called It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which is unbelievably crass. I cannot explain to you how profane and crass that it is. And most of the people on that page are sharing lines from the show, which out of context feel hateful, but in context of the conversations about the show, it's perfectly appropriate. And so we want to use the social graph of a community, which is what naturally happens in the real world, to be able to say whether that was inbounds or out of bounds as to what you actually said. So we're not even necessarily going to be filtering out swear words from our platform, because in natural communication, we kind of can learn we cannot say what is in and out of bounds. So we're taking this analog experience, which we naturally have. Yes, you might have one version of you when you were with your parents or grandparents where you would never use a four-letter word. And then you might be in a bar the next day with your buddies and use tons of four-letter words. So it's very, very contextual. And that's what our system allows for.
And do you think that the reason why I was just looking away on Facebook, on YouTube, there's a couple of the big names are organizing the cleanup of the ocean. They're saying that 30 million pounds of trash, they actually have a chance of removing that. And if I just look at all the videos and how many views they've got, there are some probably over 100 million, probably 1 billion views of this movement.
That's amazing.
Now, I mean, this is what we want. You've got to have that kind of traction to unseat the what are they called? The people that are there at the moment. Are you looking to unseat those people, or do you think that if the Facebooks and the Twitters are de facto and they're just going to exist, they might become less relevant? What do you foresee as the death of social media? What does success look like? Sorry for my business speak.
I think that, here's what it looks like. So what Tesla is doing to the combustion car business is what our success would look like to the social media business. Tesla has not eliminated all the other car companies, but is leading the revolution in how car companies look, feel, and operate. That's what I think we have the capability of doing with a number of the features that we have in there. We think that we can, like I said earlier, eliminate bots, eliminate trolls, and dramatically reduce the amount of misinformation. And I think those feature innovations that we'll be putting into our platform will have to be replicated once the marketplace starts seeing what we're doing with it.
Fantastic. I've hogged the spotlight for 32 minutes. I'd like to let everybody else chip in with some questions. I've got a couple more, but I'll leave them for a bit later. Jess, I know that you had a few questions. I might have stolen some of them. Daniel, what was your question? You might as well. How would content moderation be able to detect and block hate speech versus allowing people to talk about hate speech? Twitter has this issue a lot where Jewish people talking about anti-Semitism get banned/suspended because the content moderation thinks they're being anti-Semitic.
Oh, right. So that certainly is one of those contextual issues. So we have to have a primary level of defense for content moderation. And there's some things that we have got to make sure do not get uploaded to our system. Things like pornography, child pornography, incitements to violence, incitements to hate. Those things have got to be filtered from our system. There are criminal repercussions for child pornography being uploaded. So if Facebook allowed for child pornography to be uploaded into its servers, they are all of a sudden guilty of having child pornography, and they are criminally liable. So we have to have that initial layer. Ecosystem is doing our artificial intelligence work. We will be constantly working on that first level filtering system, and we want to try to be more liberal as much as we possibly can on allowing that. And then what our system will be doing is actually creating trust scores for people, and that once again is done by the social graph and your community. And so if you have a higher trust score, something that could be anti-Semitic would probably get through and get posted because you have such a history of saying things that are civil. Whereas if somebody had a very, very low trust score and had very little experience, that one might actually just not get posted. So it won't get amplified. You might see your comment, but nobody else might see your comment early on. And of course, it'll take time for us to do the machine learning to train those things and be looking at examples, to constantly be tweaking in that on an ongoing basis. And I wish there was a once and done deal, but as you know, it's never ending.
So are you saying somebody like Nelson Mandela, if he was still alive, he should generally get a high trust score? So what he says would generally, and I'm generalizing now, because generally didn't say too many hateful things. He might have said a few every now and again, just maybe out of context things, but generally he was quite well respected and he said things. And even if he was having a bit of a go at certain areas, it came from a place of I wouldn't say love, but respect. Whereas maybe somebody more topical at the moment, maybe Trump, maybe not so much. His score probably wouldn't get as many off the bat, but he could increase his score. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. So even if someone like Nelson Mandela did, slip up and say something incredibly hurtful, hateful, or inciting of violence, the people who are reading those posts can add real-time reactions to it, whether it be they can call it civil, they can call it uncivil, or they can report it. And so they reported it as being hate speech or insightful or violent. The system would actually hide it, go to a human reviewer who can then see the complete context and decide maybe they would allow it. But of course, Nelson Mandela's trust score might be hurt because of the way he expressed that idea. But yeah, so that's exactly it.
So that actually, I was just curious with regards to the sort of trust score concept, and also building on what Daniel was asking over there. Would this be a way that you could then build towards sort of eradicating this common trend of the conspiracy theory, where people would sort of come together and you'd need sort of facts and you'd need statements and you'd need truth that would blunt out this common concept of my opinion is fact, and look at what truth really is? I mean, do you think that this is a way that we can reestablish the reality of truth?
I think we can do a lot. So the other mechanism, which I haven't spoken about, is a mechanism that even gets you onto the platform. And let's just say right now, there's just two ways you can be on the platform. And one way as a guest. And as a guest, you can consume as much content as you like. You can watch as many videos. You can listen to as many podcasts. You can read as many articles as you want. As a guest, you can consume content. But as soon as you want to voice your opinion, either in a post or a comment, we are going to have you authenticate who you are. So freedom of speech is one of the most sacred rights of Americans that actually has spread throughout the world. But our founding fathers, when they decided to calcify this idea of freedom of speech, they never imagined that speech would be disembodied from a person's identity and therefore their reputation. So one of the reasons there is so much misinformation and it's spread so quickly on the other major social media networks is there's no repercussions. There's no risk of reputation because someone can lie just to hurt an opponent, but there's no cost to them. So as soon as you decide that you want to make a comment or make a post, we're going to know who you are. We're going to verify your identity by using your face to a real ID, which means we should be able to eliminate bots and trolls because of that. And then I think we'll dramatically reduce misinformation. And so if you are somebody who is a proponent of misinformation, you actually verify your identity. Most likely you are also going to have low trust friends, and that will also hurt your trust score. So if you are a high trust person and you have high trust friends, that would says to our system that you are respected, and most likely your comments will be more likely to be amplified. So we think that should take a huge dent out of misinformation.
I love the stats about believe nothing of what you're told, half of what you see, and all of what you do. And I might be paraphrasing. So when somebody tells you something, probably not true. If you see it, most of the times it's probably true. Sometimes you ask and deceive you, or maybe are you interpreting it, but what you actually do is truthful. So in that context, what is the truth? I mean,
yeah. That's a very good question. And I don't know if I mean, we will get into philosophical arguments and discussions about what is truth. But by and large, what is truth is what has been peer reviewed and has kind of consensus around it by other high trust people is what we today recognize as truth. Now, the good news is 90 to 95% of what I deal with on a day-to-day basis is really easily verifiable in the world that I live in my house, with my friends, in my business. My bank account statement is my bank account statement. I can really trust that. I can trust, Robin, just that you are who you are. I mean, it really is kind of on the fringes. I mean, kind of more abstract ideas that I kind of wrestle with in philosophy or politics. That may or may not be true. What's interesting about most of those areas where I kind of like to kind of go out there and test my mind, those things probably don't have much practical application to me on a day-to-day basis. They are not really impacting me. Now, obviously, whether a vaccine is harmful or not, that one does. But there was a really good body of evidence saying the vaccine was, I'm not saying was, I'm saying one thing that most vaccines were safe, for example.
David, I know you have a question, so I'm just going to get Theo to ask his question if he's still got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Peter, what do you think will attract people to this platform, or what do you plan to use to attract users to the platform?
Oh, great question. And so who we are really targeting is the creator community. That means podcast creators, video creators who currently already have audiences, but have limitations to their engagement with the audience. I cannot tell you how many times I've been on a Zoom call. Dr. Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Righteous Mind, was doing a Zoom call, and he was taking in comments so we could have real live discussion interaction with audience, and it was being overrun by trolls, and so we had to turn it off. And so I want to turn what has been podcast and video, which are currently a broadcast medium, into being a medium, again, of civil discourse like this is. This is obviously it's been a kind of, in a sense, been a curated community, high degree of civility. We kind of know what to expect. And I think we can do that same thing now, but on a mass level because we'll give people trust scores. Once again, that trust score, both in our system and also to anybody who's actually facilitating a live podcast, should be an indicator of how trustworthy they are, and not when they ask their question or when they make their comments. So that's what we're really going to cater to, is those creators. Go with the creators, have them bring their audiences here, because we think the experience for them will be so much markedly better. And more importantly, we really want to convert creators into leaders. So we don't want them only going out there and sharing ideas about how to improve the world. We want them to be able to actually attract people and actually make movement. So ocean cleanup. I mean, there's probably, I haven't seen these videos, but how are they actually organizing the people, the money, and the resources to actually do it? We want to facilitate that on our platform. Not only spread the idea, but facilitate the action.
David, Ramsey?
Yes, thanks, Peter. It's fascinating hearing your inputs and your past and your view of the future. And what was striking to me is the sort of brotherhood of man type approach that you're taking to, decent people are pretty decent in most countries, and you go and find like-minded people wherever you are. And how do you find that you can translate your platform across borders when there's different, in some ways, moral relativism? So what might be permissible and tolerable in, say, Western society might be not tolerable in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. So you've got, this desire to have, Maslow's pyramid of needs met, and we all believe the same sort of requirements. We want to be good to each other because it's mutually supportive. We've learned to be like this. But how do you actually practically do it when you're dealing with maybe very conflictual environments in which this platform would be used?
So the platform is much. I mean, first of all, I love YouTube too, and so there's a lot of ideas on YouTube, and we took one of those ideas, which actually came out of a book called The Social Prism. And what is happening currently right now on Twitter, for example, is 6% of the adults are posting 79% of the political posts, and those 79% of the political posts are not the middle, but the ideological extremes. So when you are a liberal and you're coming onto Twitter and you're seeing the conservatives, you're going, these conservatives, they are all crazy. We're painting this broad brush. But then when you get into polling, I'm going to give one example, just in the United States, which we think seems to be at war with itself. But when you actually start polling Americans on policy, I can't speak to here in the Middle East, but I can speak more a little easier to the United States. There's actually 80% agreement on things like gun control, abortion, minimum wage, climate change. It's like 70, 80% when you actually ask people about issues. It's only when you introduce party affiliation that you really start getting this rabid disagreement. So I don't think that we'll be a platform where we have 3 billion people on it like Facebook does. So there will always be people who say this platform of Civility is too boring for me. I want to be anonymous and say really horrible and hateful things. Great, there is a huge marketplace for you. I'm counting on that there's lots of reasonable people like us on this call here today who are looking for a place where we can actually unify around ideas. So we are going to use hashtags, a way of organizing stories. And so a hashtag, I don't know what the one, someone mentioned ocean cleanup, maybe ocean cleanup is a hashtag. We will find both the articles, videos, and podcasts, which are actually the most unifying, which means it's speaking to the broadest audience. We collect those into what we call a super post. So you're actually seeing the most unified messages on a given topic. So if what you want to do in some awful medieval countries, female genitalia mutilation, and that's your hashtag, I hope you get very, very little support and really few people are, congregating around that idea. It probably would be allowed on our platform, but I just hope it gets very, very little attention. I think that the unifying ideas are going to get more attention. At least we hope. It's a big giant experiment.
So Peter, then, just a little corollary to that. So do you really believe that you'll be amplifying the silent center and de-emphasizing the extremes? Because, this listening to your own echo chamber on each side of the extreme is where all the nonsense is coming from, and some of this, critical race theory, whatever is there to divide people rather than unite. All of us actually like being with each other across religions, genders.
I know,
we like
right?
being with each other. We social animals. We don't like division. Yet there are people who, for social reasons, are wanting to create the seeds of dissent because a lot of their traditional class hierarchies have now dissolved in particularly Western world. So they try to create dissent between people because that's how certain sociology is framed. And it's a poison against the vast majority of normal thinking centrist people, like I'm sure all of us on this call are.
So in short, yes, I think that's exactly what we're going to be able to do, is that our algorithms will be looking for the messaging that actually appeals to the broadest audience when you look at demographics, and then actually bringing those messages into a place where you can actually have a chance to sort through them. That's exactly what our platform is designed to do.
Wonderful.
Ramsey, you got your hand up?
Yes, hi, Peter.
Ramsey.
So this question kind of comes from insights that I think Rob raised earlier, just about how kind of YouTube does a lot of their like demonetization strategies. So a lot of content creators on there will filter themselves very arbitrarily, it seems, almost just because they don't want to get censored by the demonetization bots. And a lot of times these content creators don't realize what they've done to trigger the algorithms. A lot of times they go like, this video was demonetized. I have no idea why. I didn't swear. I didn't show any gratuitous violence or nudity. And then they petition the YouTube higher ups and they get no information back. Just like the algorithm found you were in violation of something. So my kind of question then is how transparent will you be about the kind of trust rating and why people's trust is going down or up depending on what they've done?
A wonderful question, and the answer is very transparent. So the primary reaction buttons on most social media platforms are geared around attention and sensationalism. So I create content, it gets a lot of likes, which means people are getting a lot of attention. I get this adrenaline rush because I'm creating content, it's attracting a lot of attention. I feel very, very approved and validated. Or sometimes creating controversial content, like that actually provokes people, gives me a lot of attention and makes me feel really important because I have more followers. Our primary reaction buttons are actually civil and uncivil. Those are our primary reaction buttons. And with those buttons come along word descriptors. So when someone marks a comment that you made as uncivil, it can actually describe why it was uncivil. They might say it was hateful or sexist, racist. They can say it was misinformation. So they can actually mark those things. You won't know you'll know how many uncivil reactions you get. You will know the words that they use to describe it, but you won't know who said those things about you. And so you will see a lot of transparency around your trust score. You'll know exactly what goes into it, and you'll also know exactly how to improve it. So I'll give you one example. Probably one of the best ways to enhance your trust score is to get into a civil discussion with somebody you don't know. We think that's probably a very, very high marker that if you are on the left and you're on a climate change discussion and you're having a civil discussion with someone on the right, and we know where your demographics are, and that other person is constantly marking you civil, that is probably very, very good for your trust rating. On the other hand, if you go to you pick a politician you don't like, maybe it's every politician on the left, and you go through and uncivil every single person on the left and start trashing every one of them, our algorithm will notice that you're doing that, track it, and probably hurt your trust score because you're actually trying to game the system to harm other people's trust. Our system doesn't like that. What we want is to make our trust score irrelevant, because everyone will have such a high trust score that it becomes a non-issue anymore on the platform. And then we can start rewarding other behavior, which we really want to get to. So we want to take the how you behave, that civility equation, out of the mix. And what we really are interested in is we want to facilitate real world interactions. So I have especially living through this pandemic, I've got a very, very deep-seated let's say, an experiential belief that the virtual communication that we do through meetings and Zoom is good. We need human, physical interaction. So social media is at its worst when we use it as a replacement for human interaction, and it's absolutely at its best when it facilitates real-world interaction, and most importantly, collaboration and collective action. That's what we really want to be rewarding our platform. So this civility problem is only the first problem we want to eliminate, so we can get to step 2, which is solving collective problems.
Zoe, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering, when it comes to the decentralization of data, do you think that people will run away and hide the data, or do you think there'll actually be a surprising amount who'll be willing to share and sell their data?
That's an interesting question. And there currently are some platforms right now where you can get paid for watching advertising. So if you watch an hour worth of ads, watch content and interspersed with ads, you can make $3 to $4 an hour watching advertising. So that model is currently out there. So it's a bit of an experiment to see how consumers will actually react to that. We most likely will be charging some level of a monthly subscription fee. It might be between $3 and $5. And you can offset that. You can offset that is either by watching advertising, or it could by helping us grow the network, or we most likely are going to have technical support being provided by our members. So when somebody is having a problem or trying to learn the product, rather than having a call center somewhere, we will actually connect people who volunteer and say, hey, listen, I want to help other people use the platform better, and I will provide chat support or video support to somebody else. We will reward you for that. So it'll be another way that you could actually recoup the cost of your subscription. So we got a couple different models we'll be playing with. We'll see how people feel about selling their data and then retracting it at some future point. I know for me, I'm affluent enough, and I'm not saying that in a way that I'm trying to brag about it, but I don't watch ads anymore. So that's largely what's happening, is people who can afford subscription fees aren't watching advertising anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's like moving away. I mean, it's like moving into that whole idea of no longer free social media necessarily. I mean, you are paying for it in some way, and in that sense, you're paying for whatever the privileges are that come with it, you know, or you're earning your way through it. I mean, it just makes me think of this whole discussion that everybody has with regards to AI is going to steal your job. You know, and what's going to happen to the truck driver, the 50-year-old truck driver, as an example? Well, he can maybe just go to watching ads for a living. Right. I mean, I think that would be cool. But like, okay, so perhaps.
So just on that point, at the end of the day, we just want to have people to have sovereignty. We want them to have the choice, rather than it being this bargain, the devil that you've cut, that you sign and you can't seem to get out of. That's what we want to do.
Okay. So then in terms of this, like, yes, sorry, Zoe.
Oh, no, I was just wondering, does that mean you would have a version that was free for people with ads, or you would have one paid one, and then if they wanted the option to watch ads to maybe decrease from their payment, they could take that choice?
Correct. So there's just one version of it, and there might, I don't know what our monthly fee would be, but probably in that $3 to $5 US dollars per month. There's different things that you could do to actually reduce that and potentially actually earn money on our platform as well. So creators certainly will earn money, and I think that we'll probably find a way that members can earn money by helping us build the network as well. Now, I don't know if it'd be enough to replace your full-time job, but you could actually earn money on the platform.
Okay, my question is perhaps a little bit more of a personal question, and a little bit more open-ended and perhaps a little provocative. But what are your thoughts on the Metaverse?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked that question. Yeah, I think that the Metaverse is moving 1,000,000 miles an hour in the wrong direction for humanity. There's I mean, I don't want to sound like one of these kind of old codgers who go, that newfangled technology, I'll never use it. I would love to. I've used an Oculus headset with my son playing a video game. It was huge fun. It was very, very captivating, a wonderful experience. And when Mark Zuckerberg said in his announcement, we think we can reduce, the release of carbon by minimizing the number of meetings that we take. I'm okay with that. The occasional conference being done by Oculus, but or as some kind of AR where you have a pair of glasses. But here are some of the challenges with it. Number one, Facebook might just be the least trusted corporation on the planet. It's bad enough that they're tracking my activity on Facebook and using cookies where I'm going on the web. The last thing I'm going to do is have a pair of glasses on with a camera on it that sees everything on my computer screen that now Facebook has a handle on. That's not happening. I'm also not going to be wearing a 1 pound, a big giant headset all day during work. That's not happening. And most people have fatigue after 30 minutes to an hour of wearing a headset. Plus a third of the population gets motion sick in that. And then on top of all of that, once again, with my earlier principle that people need physical contact, that we need to have an interconnected community of people which are interacting together. It's not only where, Jess, I know you and I know Rob, but Jess and Rob, you guys know each other and we all know each other. These tribes, the workplace is about one of the last places that adults can have that tribal-like connection with another group of people. So eliminating that by making everyone go virtual, it's not a replacement. It is a bad idea for humanity. So for very limited applications like the occasional conference, the occasional meeting, great. As a replacement for the workplace, I think it's a horrible idea.
Isn't tribalism what's sort of stoked all of this distrust between others?
Yeah.
We're all together, but you must be different, therefore I don't like you because you're not the same as us.
Yeah, so tribalism is number one of our best features as a species. It's really, really good because it allows us to congeal as a group, to find a problem and then work together to solve the problem. It is really, really important. We would not be here without tribalism. We would have been killed off a long time ago. And then also tribalism can be used to be very, very, very divisive against people. So the trick on an ongoing basis is to kind of figure out these cooperative constructs that allow for people to interact with tribes, individual tribes, but now in the collective good of 7.8 billion people. So how can we create systems? Let me give you some examples of systems that are, constructs that allow people to cooperate on a very large scale. Because up until about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, if you were not in my tribe, I did not know you, I did not trust you, and I would probably kill you. That's how it was. But now look at the things that we have in place that allow us to cooperate with people we don't like. Religion, money and dollars, laws, transportation networks. So we have built these really amazing constructs that allow us to cooperate on a very, very massive scale, even when we don't know, like, and trust people. So we have to constantly be figuring out how to kind of hijack our very, very Stone Age psychology and use it in a way for the collective good while still allowing us to have our very, very individual tribes. I mean, one last thing on this point is that if you believe Dunbar's number that we really only could cooperate closely with 50 to 150 people, it's really hard for us to care about somebody who's on the other side of the planet. Is an abstraction. So I know that there's somebody right now in some third world country that's either getting too little water, too much water, losing food resources, has physical insecurity. I know they exist, but I don't see them. And so I can't do anything really to help them. And so we have to constantly be figuring out how we can get people who are working for the interests of their individual tribes but are still working for the collective good. That's going to be the trick.
Fantastic.
Yeah, something just on that point that I've often thought about, which is obviously very much what you're saying there with regards to sort of human cooperation and also being able to learn from that cooperation, is sometimes you need those minorities that will defend the extremes. You need those on the opposite end of the spectrum so that you can have the majority that'll take this little bit of information and that little bit of information, and they'll meld the two together. But if you have a majority on the one extreme, that's when you've got like huge amounts of conflict. And then also when you've got a very, very tiny sort of collective minority, I think that's when the issues come through as well. So you need those conversations between the two, but you need those conversations to be educational, and you need it to be understood from both sides, where you go, okay, cool, well, this is my perspective and this is my perspective, and then everybody else that sits within that collective middle can take the important parts of that and work it into their everyday lives. So I think that's it's a great way to do it and look at it.
Very well said.
Anybody else with some? I mean, I could talk to Peter for hours, and I'm sure we can. But I'm sure Peter's got meetings to go to and things like that. So if there's any more questions, the floor is open. I by no means say that this is the end of the talk, but I encourage other people other than myself and Jess and Zoe, Theo and David to ask a few questions.
Robert, Brian, so I got a question. Peter, the role of ecosystem software, how are you going to be utilizing the software to make your platform a better place?
How are we using our software?
JSoft, well, the ecosystem software. The ecosystem software.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So ecosystem would be doing all of our artificial intelligence work. Yeah. So I think we got 27 different cases or uses for that, from helping recommend friends to recommending topics you might like to recommending podcasts. So the recommendation engine will be in there.
Okay,
also,
brilliant.
It'll be powering the trust score, so helping us calculate that trust score. We have kind of our rough broad strokes of what goes into a trust score, but we won't really know how it works until it hits the real world. And then also on top of that, we have what are called unifiers. And so the system will be looking for the message, the person who creates content around a given message that is the most unifying. So ecosystem, their artificial intelligence will be powering that as well. Yes, we got a list currently of 27 or 28 items, and it keeps growing every time we have another conversation.
So that's a lot of that last thing that Peter was saying about what's the most unifying. That'll be like using natural language processing. So using the language, understanding what the message was in the language, what was the intent, understanding those things, and bringing like-minded but similar ideas together, and bringing them together and saying these are all kind of in the same. They might be saying different things in the words, but their intent is the same. And so, figuring out, using the machine to figuring that out rather than needing a person to run through it.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody?
I don't know if this is necessarily a very clever question, but nowadays social media tends to be used by like really young kids. Like I know a few people, I knew family friends or friends that kids are like 8 years old and they already have social media of sorts. And I know that paid social media doesn't tend to be used by kids that much because they don't really have the option to pay for it unless their parents do it. But is your app going to have almost an age limit or some way to make sure that it's not 8-year-olds that have convinced their parents to let them get this, and it's, I don't know, a viable person that is using the account?
Oh, that's a great question.
Peter, before you answer that, can I ask Zoe, do you think that 8-year-olds don't have an opinion or shouldn't have an opinion?
I think that an 8-year-old's opinion would be very interesting on something like climate change or something like that, which they don't necessarily understand. But I don't think that an 8-year-old should technically have social media because of the stuff that they can be exposed to.
No.
Are you going to be the person that's going to determine the age limit? Because I think the thing would be, if a person is giving out decent content, it shouldn't really matter what their age is. If they are being civil and if they are adding to the conversation, surely we should be including them.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But then there's always going to be a side to social media that has stuff that 8-year-olds shouldn't be seeing. And even if this 8-year-old is putting out great content that needs to be seen, then maybe the account should be run by a parent, or I don't know if there's a way to maybe say that it is an 8-year-old using this account and then restrict what they can see. But I don't necessarily know if they should have the same access that everyone else has to maybe problems or stuff that they shouldn't yet be seeing. I don't know.
So first of all, yes, we will be prohibiting, you have to be an adult 18 years or older to use our platform. And we have no current plans to marketing a version to children, but we'll see what the marketplace dictates. Like I mentioned earlier, there are two different, at least two different types of classes of users, and one is a guest. And even to be a guest requires a two-factor verification, which is both a cell phone and an email address. That will preclude most children from getting onto the platform as a guest. In order to be a member where you are creating and posting opinions, you have to provide a government-issued ID, which will have your age verified on it, which means we'll make sure that you're 18 in order to be a member. So under 18, you're making a declaration. We can't stop somebody who has an email and a phone number if they're 16 years old from being on the platform. We ask them to declare they're older. We can't stop them, but it's designed for people 18 and older.
Okay, cool.
Peter, it's been a fantastic interview. Hopefully my interview skills match some of the other high-powered people that have interviewed you on your books and various things. Have you been on Good Morning America or CNN? I haven't seen you. If you have.
No, I have not been on either one of those. I think that the highest profile show was Sean Spicer. I was on Sean Spicer's video. You can find that on YouTube if you want to see me interviewed by Sean Spicer. He calls me Robert at the end, which is an excellent name. I'm a big fan of the name, but it doesn't happen to be my name. But that's about how much respect he had for me by the end of the interview.
Okay. Well, I've got a lot more respect for you, and it's great, and we love this journey that you're on and we're on. Thank you for your time this early morning in California, and I will definitely be catching up with you again. And thanks to all the participants. We will see you in another interview in 2 weeks' time, and next week another open discussion just about all things behavioral and real-time predictions. Have a great evening or / morning, depending on where you are in the world.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well
Wonderful, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you are more committed to national unity than partisanship, please check out my book, The Second Civil War, A Citizen's Guide to Healing Our Fractured Nation. My book will challenge you to improve your relationship with friends and family. Click the link in the description below.